Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kircha. Coming up in today's newscast, Benny Gantz is officially given the 28-day mandate to try and form a coalition.
International artists take a stand against the BDS movement.
And a 1,500-year-old church complex with a mysterious dedication is discovered. Now, if the pressure wasn't on before, it's certainly on now. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin is preparing to task Kahol Levan chairman Benny Gantz with forming the next government. Gantz will be given the official second mandate to negotiate a coalition at a ceremony on Wednesday evening after Prime Minister Netanyahu failed again to get a majority in his latest attempt.
And Gantz will have 28 days to try to form his coalition, but in spite of the odds stacked highly against him, Gantz is projecting high confidence. Gantz will be the first person in over a decade to get this chance over Netanyahu, and speaking to reporters by his home in Rosh Ha'ain, Gantz says that the feeling is terrific and that unlike the Prime Minister, he will negotiate openly and seriously.
החל מהלילה נפעל להקמתה של ממשלת אחדות רחבה שתבטא את רצון העם ורוב החברה.
So what about the so-called kingmaker Avigdor Lieberman? Well, the Israel Beitenu head says, or he still says, that he's not willing to discuss a so-called minority government that would include his party, Kahol Levan, and all the left-wing and Arab parties, meaning Gantz faces the same issues of coming up short for 61 seats.
In fact, Lieberman even says that we will not address this issue because, first and foremost, it serves Netanyahu. But if we reach an understanding about basic government guidelines like on wage, Haredi enlistment, and separation of religion and state, then we'll talk about it.
Meanwhile, though, on the other side of the aisle, Netanyahu loyalists are projecting their own confidence. They predict confidently, of course, that Gantz will fail the second negotiations, leaving the task up to a third lawmaker. And they also predict that this third attempt will be successful regardless of who's in charge, as the threat of third elections will finally force Knesset members on all sides to compromise.
In other news, as tensions between Turkey and the Syrian Kurdish armies calm down, the conflict with Iran is preparing to flare up following the latest skirmishes with Iranian forces all across the Middle East.
The writing is on the wall, and it's frightening. Twice now this month, Israel's high-level security cabinet has met ahead of what is highly expected to be a major attack from Iran, in line with Tehran's recent activities, including kamikaze drone strikes in Saudi Arabia and attempted drone attacks against Israel. But specifically, Israeli sources warn of a direct cruise missile or drone strike by Tehran in response to recent attacks on Iranian proxies in the region. And in fact, just on Tuesday, at least 3 unidentified drones were seen leaving the area of an attack in Syria, having targeted Iran-backed pro-Assad militias. Well, so to prepare for the threat, ministers discussed a 1 billion shekel project pushed by Prime Minister Netanyahu that would support Israel's air defense systems, particularly to defend against cruise missiles, which fly relatively low and are harder to detect. Additionally, in a rare official trip, a small but senior Israeli delegation has arrived in Bahrain to participate in a security conference co-hosted by Bahrain, the US, and Poland. The summit is part of the Warsaw Process, which discusses regional security in the Middle East. And finally, Israel is also, of course, pairing with regional powers like the Saudis, Egyptians, and Jordanians too, as they and American forces combine to counter the Iranian threat. As for Iran, though, aside from waging proxy wars, Tehran is now announcing another defiance of international agreements, in that in just 2 weeks' time, the second circuit of the country's Arak heavy water reactor will be completed. This after also advancing centrifuges to enrich uranium beyond limits set by the JCPOA last September.
Now, speaking of security, have you ever wanted to get a first-hand look at Israel's southern security situation? Well, a group of British citizens have just finished a tour of Hamas terror tunnels under the Gaza-Israel border fence. And here to tell us all about this trip is a trip organizer and chief executive officer of the JNF UK, Yonatan Galon. Thanks for joining us. Now,
Hi.
What caused you to take these tourists to see these sites in the south, and why specifically the Gaza border?
Okay, so generally JNF UK, jointly with KKL, main part of what we're trying to do is to build a bridge and to build a connection between the Jewish community in the UK and Israel. Okay, so a big part of it is actually to allow British people from the Jewish community to come to Israel and to see firsthand what's going on the ground, okay, and what they're hearing all the time in the news, in the channels about the Gaza borders, for them to come and see it and to actually come and meet the people.
Well, what did they learn from this trip?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, did you change any minds about life in Israel?
So again, for them to come and to see it firsthand, to meet the people that live there, to meet the soldiers, to hear about what they're hearing usually, what they're seeing from the television, to hear it then firsthand from the soldiers, from the people that living there, to hear about the challenges that they have, and to support them. This is a big part of the connection that we're trying to build.
Well, I can imagine that it's a bit shocking to kind of see these sites firsthand. So, you know, it kind of comes in par with a rising anti-Semitism that we're seeing across Europe as well. Could this be a sign, you know, that now that we're seeing more and more British Jews visiting, you know, the state of Israel, that there is going to be an increase in aliyah, in immigration to the state of Israel?
I think that there is already a slight increase in the aliyah. You know, in the future, it's very difficult to say what will be in the future. But I think that generally, with the rise of anti-Semitism in the UK, people are looking again and trying to build this connection with Israel. People that can afford themselves, they buy flats here, so they will have, you know, the opportunity if they need to come. And again, for people to come and feel Israel, there is a very strong connection. I would say mainly with the old generation, and part of what we're trying to do is also to build the connection and build the knowledge about Israel with the younger generation.
So is there any sort of connection between aliyah, people maybe coming to Israel from the UK, and Brexit, or is it more maybe connected to anti-Semitism, or maybe neither, and they just really want to live in Israel?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's mixed. You know, it's mixed, and it's a big question what will happen in the near future with the politics in the UK.
Sure.
That's definitely would be a trigger, potential trigger to a big increase in the aliyah.
They're watching Brexit, I'm assuming, very closely then?
They're watching Brexit. I think that more carefully they're watching Corbyn and what will happen in that area.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on, the Israel Antiquities Authority is now exhibiting one of its most incredible discoveries, a magnificent 1,500-year-old church, complete with mosaics, inscriptions, and a mystery.
So who was the so-called glorious martyr who made such an impression on the land of modern-day Beit Shemesh that a massive church was erected and later expanded by Byzantine Emperor Tiberius II himself in his or her honor? Well, we're not exactly sure, but the question has been irking Israeli Antiquities Authority archaeologists for over 3 years since they first broke ground on the massive excavation site, because whoever it was, they were really important, as the martyr's deeds earned him or her a massive church founded some 1,500 years ago on a complex some 1.5 dunams or 0.3 acres in size. And that's not all. The church was adorned from top to bottom with incredible and intricate mosaics depicting fruit, fauna, and geometrical designs, and it also featured beautiful frescoes, pillars, and columns of imported materials. Then finally, the church was flanked by 2 large halls, a large atrium courtyard, and a rare, fully intact crypt where the martyrs' remains and relics were stored.
We have now descended into the subterranean crypt located below the bema of the church. This is the reliquary niche. You have to reconstruct here that there would have been a marble chancel screen to mark off the sanctified area from the assembly hall. And here would have been placed the relics that were kept in the church. The crypt here is to allow the congregants to flow easily into this area and to experience the relics firsthand.
And as if that wasn't enough, excavations also included thousands of participants and volunteers to reveal the thousands of artifacts discovered in the complex, including the most complete glass window and lamp collection ever discovered in one site in Israel, multiple inscriptions, and a one-of-a-kind baptismal font in the shape of the cross.
Every start to the new year, a report is published with some stats about Israel and its population size. But this year, we learned something new about the Israeli demographics. And with more on this is ILTV Shanna Fold. Hello.
Hi. So it's true, every year at the start of the new year, there are some facts and figures published about population size and some interesting things, interesting tidbits. The one interesting tidbit out of this year is that 88.9% of Israelis say that they are happy and satisfied with their lives.
It's an amazing
It's a
statistic.
very high stat, yeah.
It sounds, I mean, as much as people complain here, it's kind of surprising, but yeah.
You take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we love living here.
Now, this report does come out every year, but that doesn't mean that a new census is taken every year.
Right.
And in fact, there's no regulation, there's no regulated census here. In the US, every 10 years, a new census is taken. I heard some years 62, 73. There's no rhyme or reason to when the census is taken here.
Okay, but we still have these results being released every new year.
We have just population size being renewed every year, but all of the other data that's collected by the CBS does not. And I spoke with them, and I learned a few interesting talking points from talking to the Census Bureau.
Okay.
In addition to having information from the immigration ministry, they also do surveys and tests, just like anyone does. They have to go to Bedouin tents and speak to the leader or the tribe leader of the population in order to get these very niche communities that we have here in Israel, which I thought was interesting. And moving forward on this upcoming census, which is up to the last day in 2020, so it will be published in 2021, but they're calling it the 2020 census.
Okay.
They're using the internet to reach people, which I think is crazy that it hasn't been happening before.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like there's a risk of fraud, and when you kind of eliminate that face-to-face
Yeah, but
physicality.
there must be, I mean, this is the startup nation, right? There must be some technology that can avoid that happening and allows everybody to speak up, everyone who has a phone, right?
But the benefit of, I think the benefit that outweighs the con here is that you can reach the demographic of 25 to 35-year-olds who historically don't respond to the census. Yeah.
So are the statistics that have been published up until today, have they had like a crazy margin of error? Because you said other than population size, there's kind of been like wishy-washy numbers because they're not really, there's not really like a standardized census.
So from what I understand, they use data that they already have from the Ministry of Immigration, and in addition to that, they make phone calls, they send out surveys, and they do all of this other on-the-ground type of research, but that's only in complement to the numbers that we have in our system already.
Gotcha.
All right, well, interesting. The census is obviously a big topic in the United States right now, so it's interesting to kind of hear how it works here on the ground in Israel. Thanks for joining us, Shanna.
Now, in related news, it seems that despite being happy overall, Israelis on average are all work and no play when it comes to work-life balance. A new report published by the OECD ranks Israel in a dismal 34th place out of 40. And here to discuss these findings is Gilad Alper, the head of research at the Excellence Brokerage. Thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
So, tell us a little bit about these details and these findings, and
So it's not news. We've known for many years that Israelis work longer hours than in other developed countries, or at least in most successful developed countries. And the reason is very simple. Productivity in Israel is very low. So every hour, the Israeli worker generates a small amount of value. So in order to generate enough income overall, you need to work many hours. So other countries, successful countries, say like Switzerland or Holland or the US, the US maybe not a very good example, but yeah.
But what does that mean, productivity is low?
So productivity is low means that the worker or the work that we do is not efficient. We don't generate a lot of economic value every single labor hour. So in countries that are characterized by free economies, say like Switzerland, every hour the worker, the employee, whatever you want to call it, the citizen generates a lot of economic value. So
why does that difference exist?
Just because the economic system in Switzerland, I'm taking Switzerland again as a good example, is different than the economic system in Israel. Switzerland, import is almost completely free. There isn't a lot of regulations compared to Israel. The state is a lot smaller than in Israel in terms of intervention. Central planning in Israel is a lot more robust than in Switzerland.
So you're
Switzerland
essentially
is
saying
simply a
that-
lot more capitalistic.
So institutions are essentially what lead to the lack of productivity in the workplace.
Completely.
Okay.
You can think about education level in Israel, which isn't very high and therefore creates a workforce that isn't very skilled. Traffic jams are also an impediment on productivity because you need to spend a lot of times in the road rather than actually doing some work. And you can think about many reasons. Not enough machinery and capital and so on and so forth.
So how does that translate to quality of life for the average Israeli?
Well, it's obviously a huge burden on the quality of life. You need to work long hours, and as if to add insult to injury, at the end of the day, you don't generate a lot of income. So you're not as rich as people in, say, Holland, and you work much longer hours than they do.
Right.
So it's obviously exactly what you don't want to be. You want to work as few hours as possible and generate as much income as possible. We do the exact opposite.
Now, what's interesting is that we covered this yesterday. According to the OECD, we see that our work-life balance is very bad. But on the other hand, we're fifth place in the world when it comes to the amount of millionaires per capita, according to Credit Suisse. So how can you explain that difference there?
So I think there are two things going on here. Firstly, we're talking about averages, right? An average can be very misleading. In Israel, you have basically two types of economies. The first one is the tech industry, which is extremely productive.
Right.
It's almost completely free of state intervention. And there, the economic value per hour and in general is very high.
Right.
And then there's everything else, right? The domestic economy, the stuff where you have protections against competition and imports and regulations are a lot heavier. And they drag the average down because there the productivity in that part of the economy is very low. That's one explanation. The second is that the measurement of the number of millionaires in Israel is by itself misleading because it's based on net assets, which includes the value of your apartment or your house or your flat, whatever. And the price of that is artificially inflated because of the real estate market in Israel, which is completely managed and run by the state, which means that we don't have enough supply, so prices are artificially inflated, so everyone is a millionaire on paper.
So what can we do? What can be done to help, fix these issues, to reduce the income inequality, to change these ratios?
The answer is actually quite easy. It's very simple. You just look at other countries, what they do, how they're successful in creating a standard of living which is a lot higher than what we have here in Israel. And without exception, all of the countries that are richer than ours are more economically free. Imports are free, regulation is lighter, the state intervenes less in the economy. We need to become much more capitalistic. Switzerland, which is a role model of wealth in the Western world, is the most capitalistic country in Europe, based on international ratings. It's not I'm saying that, it's the Fraser Institute and others.
We're going to have to tell the kibbutznikim that. All right,
well, they
so
don't
much.
exist anymore to remind you as a communist.
I was making a joke. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you so
Guido.
much.
My pleasure.
All right, do you believe politics have a place in art? Well, some major celebrity painters came to Israel, and getting them to make the trek was not easy. ILTV Shanna Fold got the story about what their experiences were making art here in Israel.
Politics have no place in art. That's the message from the patron of arts International Street Art Week at the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv, Israel. Pichiavo, Insane 51, and Nuno Viegas are just a few of the celebrity street artists to come to Tel Aviv from Spain, Greece, and Portugal.
I'm not here to try to change anyone's mind, and I'm just here to know a new place, to know new people, and to leave my work behind.
If you have 200,000 followers and you come to Israel, you lose followers.
The walk alongside the beach, when we go back, we see the sunset and all that. I think it's really beautiful.
But it wasn't easy to make this come together. Organizers put on an exhibit like this one in Beirut and said getting this support took 5 minutes.
I thought it would be peanuts organizing. I'm good in organizing stuff. But it was a huge project.
Just the mere decision to vacation in Israel can cause some public figures to experience backlash, let alone taking on a work project. This one took a full 2 years to come to fruition.
We found 7 street artists that were willing to come to Israel.
There's some people, for the good and for the bad, replying about my stay here.
Both me and Olivier have met a lot of anti-Israel feelings. BDS is growing in Europe. I think the only way to fight BDS is with positive energy and bringing big artists to show them that Israel is more than only the Middle East conflict.
Jaffa is known for its interesting architecture and beautiful port, but it's not necessarily known for excellent street art. That's about to change.
All the Israeli artists heard about it and they started to paint here as well, so we're actually creating a kind of Wynwood of Miami here in the port of Jaffa. We left a stamp, and we left a stamp with excellent artists.
This particular painting I made here is a paper plane.
I did like a bird and a girl flying, so I want people just to feel free when they see it.
When you have like one idea, the first place where you write it down, it's on a piece of paper. Put it in a drawer, forgot about it, you can toss it in a bin, or you can like shape it and make it fly.
While some try to politicize the works, these artists say painting at the port is simply an opportunity to experience a new place.
I'm painting, I go for a dive, I go back painting. This is something that it's always very attractive to me. And yeah, like this is a place of the world that it's like, it's in history for years and years, and this was my chance to know it for up close and in person, so I took that chance.
Wow, that is gorgeous, the artwork there.
I know, you went and visited it firsthand.
I
didn't you?
did, yeah. My wife and I, we went over the holiday break, and it was gorgeous. A lot of stuff was still kind of in the works,
Right.
but it was really
Well, maybe
a cool
there's room
experience.
for you to contribute because you're an artist yourself.
One day, I'll hold
We'll
my
see
breath.
about that. I'm going to stay away because I should not do any art. All right, moving on. Well, when it rains, it pours, especially here in Israel. Many cities around the world are prepared for bad weather, but since Israel is nestled right in the heart of the desert, we don't usually experience tons of water falling from the sky, and we especially do not expect it to end up indoors, although it often does. Now, for an inventive country that's considered to be the startup nation, you would think that at least the infrastructure could handle the moisture, but take a look.
שלום למצלמה. אתם רוצים גלים?
Oh my Lord. It's just hilarious
It's
watching
intense.
this because, so we're about to see a lot of rain coming and we've been praying for it with Sukkot, but every time it rains in this country, it's like
Oh no,
the
it's
end
that.
all.
It's that.
Yeah.
It's just a river.
Right.
Well,
I've actually been on public buses that have been filled with water when it rains.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've seen that.
Yeah, with the cars too. You know, you go down and like randomly in the street, it just has a nice little dip there, and you're sunk.
And the thing is, it's like, you know, it does make sense because we have experienced a lot of droughts here in Israel, so we aren't as prepared per se for what happens when there's.
But with that in mind, we should have some infrastructure. I think that can maybe cope with the water and preserve it ideally. Maybe fill some aquifers. But on that note, let's take a look at the weather
let's take
forecast.
a look at the weather forecast.
Tonight you can expect cloudy skies and scattered showers with a low of roughly 64 or 18 degrees Celsius in the north, 66 or 19 degrees Celsius in the south, and 57 or 14 degrees Celsius in the center by Jerusalem. Then tomorrow should be marked by heavier rainfall across the country and highs between about 75 and 86 or 24 and 30 degrees Celsius.
All right, well, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.54 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Natasha Kirchak.
And I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.